Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Amplify Texas Elementary Literacy Program 3-5 Lesson Internalization session. At the end of my name is Callie Gonzalez. I work for the Achievement Network. You might have seen me in your classrooms, or um, some of you may have seen me at some of your meetings with Mr. Book. However, today I'm going to be your narrator through this PD. There will be a quiz at the end as part of your exit ticket to get credit for this PD. Make sure that you really do. Feel free to put me on 2 times speed, but you really are going to be tested on some of these details. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up there. All right. You will have your guided notes linked in the Bloom, Amplify, and Eureka PD dashboard. You are going to see a couple things. You're going to see this recording, obviously. Make sure that you have the handout. You will also have access to the deck, and lastly, the exit ticket. You are going to be working out of this handout, and in the handout are going to be all the links that you're going to need to all the materials for today. All right, take a second and just review today's outcome. All right, so today we're going to spend the time unpacking the lesson internalization protocol. Now, some of you may be sitting here like, I do this in my TPTs with Mr. Book already. Great. So this will just deepen and ensure, are you attending to all the steps? Some of you might be like, this is brand new, and great. I'm so happy you're here too. All right. I want you to reflect, what is one aspect of your typical lesson planning routine? Okay. So I don't know about you, but shifting from planning to internalization is kind of a new shift for some of us. Some of us are used to creating things and having that barrier and that weight of having to design everything. However, you're going to get more. And so I want you to think about how difficult this can be for some of you that really love to create materials. However, when we think about what grade level is, it is rare that we often are putting grade level materials in front of kids that are not grounded in an HQIM. And so I want you to really lean into the idea around internalizing. Just like I want you to think of the metaphor of a pilot. A pilot doesn't need to engineer the plane. They just need to fly it really well, right? And so that's the same thing for you. You do not need to create all the materials in front of your students. You already have a high quality materials, and your job is to fly the lesson well for every student, which is not an easy feat, right? So you're going to use all your knowledge and instructional skills, but really the level of planning really dictates the level of success for students. Okay, so in your handout, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. I want you to pause this video and I want you to skim through the protocol and reflect on the 2 questions on the slide. How does this process reflect or compare to what you're currently doing in your campus? And how do you anticipate this protocol supporting you with instruction? Now, again, it might feel really overwhelming or detailed, but I promise you, after time, it goes pretty fast with practice. So go ahead and pause this video in 3 minutes. Really deepen your understanding of every single step. Feel free to print this out and annotate it because your quiz is going to ask you questions about specific steps in the protocol. Okay, so let's spend some time internalizing a lesson. So I'm going to use Unit 1, Lesson 1 that is in your handout. However, Feel free to actually follow these steps using tomorrow's lesson or an upcoming lesson to get ahead. I'm also like, let's be efficient with our time, folks. So, your pre work, most schools will have step one and step two be pre work so that they could actually deepen collaboration and discussion around the actual step three. And so, what you're going to think about is like once you have read through the module and you internalize the module, now you're going to take a minute and you're going to read through your upcoming your lesson or this specific lesson that was linked in your handout. And so if you've already done this, just fast forward, but take 4 minutes, look at step one, and identify what is a lesson purpose and objective. And, look at the TEKS, read through the objectives and read through the entire lesson. I often would push teachers to do the work that the students are doing because then the lesson actually becomes alive and you can start to understand, oh, this could be a potential pitfall for students to access for a specific group of students in my class. And so think about the time you really do need to take to go through and do the work and read the texts to deeply understand what is the purpose of the objective. So go ahead and pause here and do that. All right. So step one is all about getting the full scope of the lesson. Like it says, use the lesson, take a look at the first page of the lesson and determine what the primary focus objectives are. You're going to see how those objectives relate to the TEKS. And it's also at the bottom of the page. However, again, third through fifth grade teachers should really be digging deeper and reading all of the texts and annotating the texts for complexities. What are some stop and jots you want to find? So the first step would be read the text, do the student work, then actually identify what is the lesson's purpose and objective. Speaking of, if there are any read alouds, you're going to want to read through those texts like we talked about during the lesson. Like identify like what are key vocabulary that could get in the way that's essential for students to understand to get to really be able to apply themselves on the exit ticket. For some 3-5 unit students are going to be engaging in novel studies, and it's recommended that you read the entire novel prior to starting the unit, obviously. But I wouldn't even go a step further. What type of questions are you going to ask in the middle? And we're going to get to that in step 3. But think about what are the critical parts of these texts and how are you going to engage students at those parts? So take a minute and skim through your read alouds or your texts if you brought them or the ones linked here. All right. So another part of step 1 is that you really want to use a lesson. So if you have this printed out, you really want to annotate the lesson, indicate where are the check for understanding? What are your rounds and laps? Who are you going to be monitoring for? And so by the time we get to the exit ticket, it's too late. So what are the look fors up until until the exit ticket? And so really identify pivotal check for understanding. I would even say outside of what the lesson says, are there additional check for understandings that need to be monitored first before they even identify the check for understanding? All right, so I want you to go ahead and pause and identify in your upcoming lesson, what are the check for understandings? Where are they? And annotate that in your lesson. And I would also really annotate that in the text. So we talked about annotating, right? But again, annotation is important. Like it has to be done. It's a key practice of how to internalize. It is a big part of being successful and understanding the lesson's purpose. So identify and record the literacy skills, knowledge, and vocabulary that students need. I would also push like knowledge. What is some background knowledge that students may need in order to truly analyze the content in your upcoming lesson? And so I want you to go ahead and annotate and track where that shows up throughout the lesson. Again, what are the literacy skills, knowledge, and vocabulary that students are going to need to complete the formative assessment? All right, y'all. So now we're going to take some time to work independently to annotate Unit 1, Lesson 1. If you've already done that, you can skip. You can just keep, you don't have to pause this video. But I do want to make sure I remind you on this slide, you're going to see the 4 boxes, and those are the Arby's. And they're there to remind us of like the design, how the design of Amplify highlights when reflecting through this process. So think about how Amplify students experience these Arby's because of the materials. And going back to the reflection of creating, most of the time we see students may experience text complexity, but the text-based responses isn't there. And so really ensuring that we are fully using these materials and not creating our own. All right. So if you completed step 1, move on to this step. Now, this step, some of you may be new to Amplify and you may be like, oh man, my pacing is struggling. And that's okay. That's actually normal. Your first couple years of taking on Amplify or Eureka. And so this step is really important for you. This step is understanding how the lesson is sequenced and paced. And that's going to help students experience a more cohesive lesson because they'll better understand how each component is connected. So I'm going to briefly touch on this step and you can dive deeper on your own later, but I want to save some time for us so we can get into step 3. So the lesson that I provided in your handout, I want you to look at how the Amplify Texas program lesson allocates time. So the timestamps shown on this slide show the transition in the lessons and the amount of time needed for each section. So just pause and think about all of the minutes here, right? Are we giving enough time to do justice for this lesson? All right, now the heart of step 3. So, step 3 is all about preparing to teach each part of the lesson. It's important to utilize the embedded supports and sidebar supports to address the needs for all learners. I have to admit, when I do walkthroughs all over the country, one of the things that I notice is that when students are opting out and because they can't access the current materials or aspects of the lesson, oftentimes it's the teacher has skipped these embedded supports. And so I really need us all to lean in and think about, in your class right now, you definitely have students that are not on grade level. Majority of schools across the nation have students sitting in front of them that come in either right below, exceptionally below. However, they still can and will successfully access this if we really look at these embedded supports and the scaffolds necessary for the different types of students. And so I really want you to reflect about, have you in the past used these embedded supports and how do you need to start? And so right now, I want you to pause and I want you to look at the embedded supports either in your upcoming lesson or in the lesson that is linked. Okay, so we're going to practice step 3 though. I know I just went off on embedded supports, but now we're actually going to follow that protocol. And so you're going to have 10 minutes to use the lesson internalization protocol to complete step 3 of either the lesson I linked or the lesson that you have for tomorrow or the one that you've already started to internalize. Again, we're just zooming in on step 3. And so pause this video and complete step 3. And don't forget about those embedded supports. And think about how are you going to bridge the activities from step 2? How are you going to connect them all? All right, go ahead and pause this video. All right. Now that you've done step 3, we've done step 1, 2, and 3. I want you just to reflect a little bit. What did you notice when practicing the lesson internalization so far? And what do you wonder? I want you to think about the experience your students, specifically the students that are struggling to make growth. What key steps in this so far do you really need to lean into to really ensure that all students can be successful? Okay, so now we're going to debrief. Now remember, internalizing, it feels inauthentic and it takes a long time, right? But I want you to know that it can be a big skill to learn, but it's so well worth it. So take a couple minutes to reflect independently and synthesize your learning in your handout. There are 3 questions in the slide. Just pick one. Maybe the last one, actually, that's more grounded in students. There's space in your guided notes to capture your thoughts if you prefer to write. I often force everyone to write first or stop and jot because that is what I want students to do before they talk. And that really holds all of us accountable for the thinking. So, right now, practice that. Force yourself to answer one of these questions in your handout. Okay, so now the closing. You are now going to go back into the Bloom PD recording materials dashboard, and you are going to take the exit ticket. Now, remember, you can go while you're taking the quiz, make sure you put your name, Bloom, that you're a teacher, but also when it asks for provider, put Achievement Network, and make sure you go through the entire quiz and then hit submit. It's really important. Otherwise, you won't get credit. If you get stuck, we all do, folks, please go back through this video, go into the deck that's linked. And if you need more help, please just reach out to me or reach out to the Bloom leadership team. All right, everyone, happy quiz time and have a wonderful day.